J.R.R. Tolkien culture warrior. The alt-right religious crusades appropriation of Tolkien. Holy hell, Robin. The sheer brass balls on this guy. Like, he must have genuine troubles putting his pants on in the morning. Because that is one hell of a bald-faced lie of a claim right there. Rather than being a Tolkien scholar, my dude, I think you'd do an excellent job as Goebbels' biographer. Oh my god. The alt-right religious crusades appropriation of Tolkien. Oh yes, the alt-right, the people in power in Lord of the Rings right now. As you can see here, this is a common tactic amongst the alt-right. Black, closely cropped-haired, dark-haired elves, absolutely. An unavoidable cliche, even, in fact, on the alt-right. Or the tiny black beardless female dwarf. Good God. Oh, I mean, this... Holy hell. In case you're confused as to what on God's good green earth this is, and I hardly blame you, this is the Oxenmoot. It's a gathering of Tolkien scholars, heavy quotation mark implied, organized by the Tolkien Society. Despite the name, it has actually no connection to Tolkien whatsoever. They've simply decided to, borrow the name a little bit to give themselves a bit of extra gravitas in the situation. They are a very left-leaning and rather woke organization that, well, and in the words of Goebbels, has done what they are now excusing the alt-right of doing, appropriated Tolkien. And just to point out as well, actually, we'll get to that in a second. We'll skip over the Tolkien, the Catholic religious man. And, damn it. I'm sorry, it's just like the very inherent principle. Let's do it right now, okay? So, Bounding into Comics, a site I very much so do recommend, has made an excellent rebuttal of the very idea that Tolkien would be a culture warrior for the left in any way, shape, or form, or that he could possibly be appropriated by the religious alt-right, because Tolkien was a fervent Catholic man. He was genuinely religious, and as they quote here in several of his letters, he clearly stated that his religion was a great inspiration for him whilst he was writing the books. All the religious alt-right needs to do to appropriate Tolkien is quote him. God damn it. But right, okay, so, again, since the Bounding into Comics site's already done a very good job of debunking that bullshit, let's get back to the reason why such a bald-faced lie, such a preposterous topic, even exists in the first place. Now, the Oxenmoot has been home to some pretty ridiculous topics in the past. This year, it's relatively tame by comparison, with the only other one that really leapt out at me was, an environmental bioethical approach to aging bodies of Middle-earth. An environmental bioethical approach to aging bodies. It sounds an awful lot like SJW code for, ja, wir nicht haben Krankenhaus. Ich haben Gaskammer. We're just gonna put all the old people in the gas chambers and turn them into co-posts. It's very ethical and it's very biologically friendly as well. Along the idea of, was it that Swedish scientist that said that we needed to turn to cannibalism to save the environment? But, hell, it's so lingoy. I don't even know what the hell they are intending with the title there, so let's return to this J.R.R. Tolkien culture warrior one, shall we? Now, immediately, on the face of it, this is a ridiculous assertion, both because of Tolkien's personal, religion, and because of, well, this. Frankly, Amazon's The Rings of Power, and their beardless black dwarf princess. if there is anyone appropriating Tolkien's legacy, they swing the other direction quite clearly. So why even make the argument? Well, that's the interesting part. Recently, over the course of the last 2 or 3 months, etc., we've been starting to see the swing back towards the right begin to be noticed by the left wing. It started with like Netflix firing a bunch of people, which I've covered previously. It has continued with a ton of companies refusing to take a side on the very controversial Roe v. Wade overturning, which is now actually properly official. Now, it might sound ridiculous that of course a company wouldn't have any opinions on abortion rights, duh, and yet, well, several companies do. Disney have already vowed to help people kill their babies as much as they want, in fact. And just a few years ago, it would be inconceivable that companies wouldn't have an opinion. Hell, even now during one of the best Pride months in history, most of the companies have painted their logos in the usual Pride colours. The left has been on the ascendancy for a half-decade plus now, and has been in basic dominance the last 3 or 4 years around. Yet, with the Netflix thing, and for me more personally, 40K's decision to stick with 30-year-old law has been a real breath of fresh air, particularly in how aggressively strident the wokest reaction to it has been. And there's the interesting part. Again, why make a ridiculous title like this? Well, it's because they've finally realized that they're properly losing. The article we covered yesterday, for example, where Salon themselves said that the fandom menace is winning over their position, and also returning to a lot of the dehumanization tactics of 2015, 2016, referring to the fans as cancer cells, etc., indicates to me a burgeoning desperation, frankly. Because is there? The pendulum of politics, of course, ever swings, although in this case it has swung remarkably far to the left, and the resultant recoil is likely to be just as drastic, but it is often very difficult to see the pendulum begin to swing, and our side was guilty of that as well. I've told you the story many times that one of my first interactions with Sargon was talking, for example, about Anita Sarkeesian, and how he was like, oh yeah, no, if I can just talk to her, she'll totally understand and we can be friends. Myself too, when I saw some of the earliest ridiculous articles about 40K, like tabletop gaming has a white male terrorist problem, I figured, okay, well, these people are clearly idiots. I just need to explain the situation to them, and they'll understand, because, well, their position is lunatic. But again, it wasn't about representation. It wasn't about diversity. It wasn't about sexism or anything like that. It was about power and influence. And they got it. Oh, by God, did they get it, but they got it too quick. It got to their head, and they pushed too far. Oh, dug too deep and too greedily, a more accurate metaphor considering the topic, I do suppose. And this has resulted in a fairly short-lived era of dominance, if we're already beginning to see the swing back to the point where the people whose pendulum is swinging against them can see it. We're probably within another 5 years away from a complete turnaround. How far the pendulum will then swing to the right? Well, that's an interesting topic for another decade, I do suppose, though I hope it doesn't go too crazy, but we'll see. And articles like this is an indication that they are getting articles, there goes. Well, speeches, more correctly, seminars, is an indication that they are ready to go on the defensive again. And they don't know quite how to do this, and so they are simply retreading old ground. With the very idea, the alt-right's religious crusade, the alt-right's been dead for a couple of years now at least. It hasn't been a serious political movement in a very long time. Even amongst the most zealous of left-wingers, they recognize that, yeah, it's not really an issue anymore. In the same way that they're bringing up Gamergate more and more frequently. These are the spectres of yesteryears, things they believe they can attack with impunity because, well, it's worked. Undoubtedly, we're going to be seeing a return to the cries of racism and sexism even more stridently, but the problem is, the tactics that did work in 2015, well, I don't think they're gonna work today. the accusation of racism, it's nothing more than a marketing ploy these days, to the point that Disney instructs Moses Ingram to get ready for the racist abuse and tell them immediately so that they can make a big deal about it to try and shore up Obi-Wan Kenobi's failing ratings. And on that topic as well, there was a very interesting comment on the "We Are Winning and the Left Are Admitting It" video that I did yesterday, where a person said that I don't feel like we're winning because of shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And make no mistake, here's the thing, it's gonna take quite a while yet. The Rings of Power is still in production. Obi-Wan Kenobi was made under the full, complete authoritarian regime of the left, and it's going to continue for quite some time as well. You're probably going to be seeing at least 1 or 2 spin-off shows of Lord of the Rings being equally woke to the almost guaranteed burgeoning disaster of the Rings of Power before you start seeing a real swing back, because all of these industries take ages to turn around and self-adjust. Strange New Worlds is a brilliant example of this. Star Trek has been bent over a barrel and violently butt-fucked for decades now, with STD and Picard being the most recent and obvious example of political nonsense having worked its way deep into the franchise to the point of outright conquering it. To, well, where we arrived at today, where The Orville, a parody show of Star Trek, is more Star Trek than actual Star Trek, and yet Strange New Worlds, I believe, is the beginning of the normalization process. It's a little bit woke, and it's certainly ripping off a lot of shows. Oh god, is it retreading old ground? But at the same time, it is nowhere near as overt as STD or Picard. In fact, I would argue that it's treading a pretty fine line, with the exception of that first episode in particular. It's gonna take a lot of time. And I've said this again and again and again for years now. It will take a long time for the adjustment to really begin setting in. But I do thoroughly believe we are on the right path, and the more defensive and aggressive they get, the more certain of it I am. So there you have it. J.R.R. Tolkien, culture warrior, and the alt-right religious appropriation of his name. For once, Tolkien might be nodding in agreement. Ah, yes. I do indeed agree with at least some of their religious points of view, if not a whole lot of the others. Till next time, I've been Art. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.